I would actually now maybe start with the webinar, and I will first introduce myself. My name is Vivian Paravicini, and I work as a senior officer in the safety and legal protection team in IRC Germany, and I'm in the anti-trafficking team. And just a few words, IRC stands for International Rescue Committee. It's a global humanitarian organization, and in Germany, in Europe and in Germany, we mostly work on resettlement, asylum, and integration projects. And today, I will be talking actually briefly about one project and about another one. And if there's any other questions later on, I will also provide my contacts. We will be recording the first part of the webinar, and that will be mostly about input and presentations, and it will last 1 hour. And the second part of the webinar will be mostly on open discussions with all of you. So you're always welcome to share your reflections in that part of the open discussion. The second part will not be recorded. And if you do not wish for your image to be shown in the recording, please feel free to turn off your camera and just listen in or write in the chat. There's no problem at all for that. I invite everyone to please mute themselves while we present, so that it's more clear. And yeah, if you have questions, you can also write them in the chat. I would start now with the presentation. So welcome to the cross-border collaboration on anti-trafficking, lessons learned in transnational referrals and outlook on the EU Migration Pact webinar. We will be spending the next hour and a half together, and I'm very happy to have all of you here. And I can see there's more and more people coming in. So thank you so much for taking the time. This webinar is we've been organized in the context of REACH. REACH is a EU-funded project that started almost exactly a year ago and will last another year, and it stands for, it's very long title, but yeah, resilience through enhanced access to comprehensive help and strengthening protection for victims and survivors of sexual violence in exploitation and trafficking. This is actually the third webinar of a series of 6, because we work as IRC Germany in consortium with other great partner organizations, and 2 of them, Fondazione Amaranta, our Spanish partner, and FITS, our German partner, have already done their webinar, and we will be sharing the link. And the aim is to share best practices among practitioners, so with all of you. Just briefly going through the agenda, I will be first talking for the next more or less 20 minutes and sharing lessons learned from a previous European project. And then there will be my colleague, Dr. Adina Schwarz, who is the head of Jadwiga, that is a specialized organization for the support of victims of trafficking, and of the Bavarian Anti-Trafficking Helpline. We'll be sharing some case studies of transnational referrals and what went well and what was more complicated. And then Dr. Francesca Cimino from the Ca' Foscari University of Venice will go more into the present future, and give an overview of the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, and reflect about the main consequences for victims of trafficking. So we have a dense plan for today, and I invite all of you at the end of the presentations to share your reflections and your questions, whether it is by just raising your hand through Teams or writing them in the chat. We will be having some time to address them. So now going right into it, I will be talking about TIATAS, which is, it stands for Transnational Initiative Against Trafficking in the context of asylum systems. And this is a project that was implemented between 22 and 23. It lasted a year and a half and funded through AMIF, so European Union funds. It was done in consortium, so we were part of the consortium with our very professional and capable partners in Italy, Spain, Greece, and Germany. Italy's and the reason why the consortium was made this way is not, of course, a case, but it's because in Italy, Be Free and Dedalus, and in Spain, Fondazione Amaranta, and in Greece, Arsis, they represent, I mean, they and their countries represent the main entry points in Europe, and in Germany, Jadwiga also was part of the consortium, and we selected them, or we decided to partner up since Germany is one of the preferred destination countries. The goal of TIATAS, in a few words, it was to strengthen common practices, focusing on early identification and safe referral to trauma-informed care of victims of trafficking in the context of asylum procedures. And it aimed to do so through a transnational referral mechanism. I just want to do a small disclaimer. When I use the term victim of trafficking, it is based on a legal term, and I don't want at all in this way to refer to survivors of trafficking as victims without agency. On the contrary, just want to, to state this. Going back to TIATAS, TIATAS aimed at reaching this goal through different type of activities addressed to different stakeholders. One of them was capacity building of frontline responders. Another one was improving access to rights for affected persons through different information provision. And finally, also information provision to decision makers. So we will go a bit more deep into this, but it's just to give a bit of an overview. And as I mentioned, one of the main tools of TIATAS were the transnational referrals. So I will talk about transnational referral in the context of trafficking human beings, since trafficking is inherently a cross-border phenomenon, but victim protection systems are often national. So, of course, as you can imagine, as you know from your experience, this creates gaps. And the transnational referral mechanism aim is really to close these gaps. So the key idea of transnational referrals is really the continuity of care across borders. So this is just a definition, which, I mean, I will also explain a bit more, let's say, deconstruct a bit what transnational referrals are, but it's really a system of cooperation between countries. And as I said, the final aim is to ensure continuity of care. It is rooted into the directive, the Anti-Trafficking Directive, but the directive does not explicitly define the TRMs. It requires still, it says that it requires cross-border cooperation and victims protection. The idea is really that the victim support must continue even when the person moves from one country to the other one. And to really understand how transnational referral mechanism work in practice, we can have a closer look on how in TIATAS we tried to turn the transnational referrals into a practice. And therefore we have developed some tools, because otherwise like this, you know, it seems like it's just theoretical things, but it's not. It should be actually something very practical, very tangible, made of tools. And one of the tools that we have developed, I mean, before going into the tools, sorry, I will just mention the key functions of the transnational referrals to make sure that we all have a bit of an idea of what is its aim. And the first key function, of course, it's the identification and referral. So to identify people as victims of trafficking and, of course, refer them. and to make that as soon as possible, especially the identification. The second one, and I put them not by chance in the middle because it is really at the heart of everything, is to ensure that victims of trafficking have access to healthcare, shelter, and legal aid, not only in the country where they are, but also across border. The third one is really what we stressed a lot on in TIETAS, is the cooperation between actors, whether it's authorities, law enforcement, and NGOs. The aim is that everyone should cooperate and, of course, share also data, always in compliance with the data protection regulations. The fourth, let's say, pillar is the legal safeguards. So legal safeguarding, what does it mean? It means to respect the principle of non-punishment of victims, and in particularly the Anti-Trafficking Directive stresses the importance of special protection for minors, for children. And finally, if victims of trafficking, affected people wish to return to their home countries, also to inform them and support them in their reintegration. We will be in TIETAS, of course, as I described the consortium. I think it's clear that we focused on referrals that happen within European borders, so within the European member states and across European member states. And yeah, how we tried to work towards this in TIETAS is through developing different tools. One of them was the so-called standard operating procedures. And I will be sharing all of this information with you also after the webinar, so do not worry, because the idea is really to try to make these tools available to everyone so that you can actually use them in your daily work if you deem necessary. The standard operating procedures, it's really a document, like it's a document with different sections. It's very clear, and the idea is to really establish between frontline professionals a cooperation system and ensure this type of communication. One of the key is that it is victim centers and and it follows the right-based approach. And the way it's structured, as you will see when we share it, it really defines the roles of the different actors involved. And then there's different scenarios. For instance, and if different scenarios for which we have developed different tools. So for instance, there's the scenario of the integration in another member state, so across member states of a victim of trafficking. Or there's a scenario which, as you all know, it's a Dublin referral, which happens a lot, of a person that is an EU member state but needs to go back to the one that they entered first according to Dublin regulations. And in order to support all the actors involved, we have developed different tools, such as MOUs, so Memorandum of Understanding, because we mentioned that, you know, cooperation is key. Contact information templates, the risk and needs assessment tool developed by Jadwiga, declaration of consent. So there's really a lot of tools that you can use practically, because our aim is really to turn it into practicality. And support everyone who would like to actually use them. And the key impact is really to try to strengthen them, and as I said, to translate you know, a policy or directive into practical actions. Of course, we tried to do so during TIETAS, but it came with some challenges, also due to some limitations that we had in the project that I tried to outline here. Because, as I mentioned, we as a consortium were in Spain, Italy, Greece, and Germany. And this proved to be a bit limited in geographical terms because people, for example, crossed France a lot. Not only French-speaking migrants, but also people who might want to reach other European member states, and this implied, of course, losing track of many people that we wish to support. There were also legal and policy barriers because of different data sharing. Data sharing laws in different countries, and it made it difficult to really put into place these referrals. And another point that is very important is that what the consortium encounters is that many people, because of their lived experience, many victims of trafficking and presumed victims of trafficking because of their lived experience, they often had mistrust towards institutions because of violence and abuse of power they have experienced throughout their journey and even in European countries. And therefore, it was difficult to really do this collaboration with law enforcement or authorities without without their collaboration, of course, which is at the center of everything. And finally, as you all know, there's different legal frameworks in different EU member states and procedures, and that made it very difficult to find a harmonized way to collaborate. I don't want this to seem very disencouraging because, we did encounter challenges, but we were also able to do some transnational referrals, and more importantly, we're able to establish collaborations, very strong collaboration that lasts until today, and this is a path. So I would like to just finally share with you some key learnings that we collected in the whole consortium. And as I said, I mentioned this very often, the coordination is very important because it really ensures a smooth departure and a smooth arrival. And it reduces the risks of re-trafficking because, of course, if a person arrives in Germany and is welcomed by an anti-trafficking specialized organization, the risk that their vulnerability is increased and exposed, of course, decreases. The standard operating procedures improve the clarity and also the speed of how a referral can be done, which is very important since we're dealing with people that have also urgent needs of moving, of care, of financial needs. Also, capacity building is very important. We did this, I mentioned it at the beginning, in Tietas, so to really do trainings. We trained more than 500 professionals, and it was extremely important. As it is important to always have a victim-centered approach, so to put the needs of the individual case by case always at the center. And as I mentioned before, there's a need for an integrated system, which is probably also one of the reasons why there was the EU Migration Pact, but we will see also how this might also impose challenges to victims of trafficking. It was a lot of information, and I'm sorry if it was too much, but if you have any question or something is not clear, I really invite all of you to write it in the chat or keep your questions for the end and ask it in the open discussion space that we will have. And now I would like actually to pass over to my colleague, Dr. Jadina Schwarz, who we will go a bit more into stories, and she will be sharing case studies from their organization. So thank you so much, Adina, for being here. It's a pleasure to work again together since we were working together in Tietas, and I think this also shows that the collaboration doesn't end with the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivia. That's how it should be, I guess, alongside of sustainability. I'm very happy to be here together with you today and to share some further information about the experiences we had during the implementation of the project. Maybe just a few words about our counseling center, so you're maybe able to be able to make a context of the presentation I'm going to make. So our counseling center is based in Bavaria, in Germany. And we are supporting yearly about 300 victims of human trafficking, regardless of the form of exploitation. We are able to provide support and assistance. We are also in arrival centers present in Bavaria. That means that we are able to identify potential victims of human trafficking shortly after they have arrived in Germany. And this enabled us also during the TIATAS project, but it is also a core part of our activity to identify at most early stage potential cases of human trafficking. During the TIATAS project, we have supported about 200 confirmed cases of human trafficking, and quite a bunch of them have decided to return to their home countries, while we as a counseling center have yearly about 30 persons that return to their home countries. These 30 persons, or the vast majority of these 30 persons, are persons coming from EU countries that decide to return to their home countries. These being mainly Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. But today our focus is on asylum, so I'm not going to speak about these cases, but I'm going to speak about third country nationals that have looked for shelter and protection in Europe, have landed in exploitation, and then have willingly decided to return to their home countries. So in the TIATAS project, and also our counseling center is not supporting or is not actively involved in cases where the government decided to send the victims back to their home countries, but I'm going to refer only to the cases where victims have decided, because of a reason or another, to return to their home countries. So what we did at an early stage of the project was to do kind of states of the art and understand better what's out there in terms of safe repatriations, transnational repatriations of victims of human trafficking. And we found quite a bunch of information. However, in the moment where we wanted to write something about the evaluation of the transnational referrals, we have seen that there was very limited information and also expertise in terms of how the transnational referral has, after the referral took place, been evaluated. And this was mainly because in very few cases such evaluations take place. So this was one of the focuses we had, to develop also an evaluation tool to see whether the transnational referral took place in a successful manner, be it on a short term or on a long term. The tools I'm talking about, and these are two tools, a risk and needs assessment tool and a guideline for safe and trauma-informed referrals. These two tools can be found on our website. Our colleague is going to send in the chat the two links to these tools. So please feel free to download them and also walk alongside of me during the tools in my short presentation today. What you will see is that during or for the risk and needs assessment, we have first analyzed which the stages of human trafficking are, and we have coupled these risk and needs assessments with the stages of recruitment, transportation, exploitation, and the phase after exploitation, so whatever happens after the moment of identification. And we have seen that there are very different vulnerabilities coupled to these stages, and that also a thorough risk and needs assessment needs to be done that is coupled to all these stages. If you open the risk and needs assessment at page 6, you will see these tabs: prior to exploitation, during recruitment, during transportation, during harboring, during exploitation, and then after exiting exploitation. And then the last stage, prior, during, and after the transnational referral. Now, why is this very important? Because based on our expertise, we can only ensure a successful transnational referral if we analyze all these risks and all these needs based on this stage, or that come out through these stages. And we are able to address them with risk mitigation measures and with appropriate support methods. And then throughout the guideline for safe referrals, we have created the guideline also based on various pillars: the identification phase, where victims of or potential victims of human trafficking are identified, then the first assistance and protection, what needs to be done, which are the minimum standards within this phase, and then the long-term assistance and social inclusion, and only as a fourth stage, the return and social inclusion, followed possibly by a criminal justice phase or civil proceedings. Vivia has already said I'm going to talk to you also about a few cases that we have assisted during our project, but I wanted to highlight these stages just to show how complex such proceedings are, how many steps there are before a transnational referral is taking place, how many steps there are during the transnational referral, and to always think along the evaluation, both a short-term evaluation and a long-term evaluation after the transnational referral has taken place. Also, what's important to know is that we have developed these tools by involving survivors of human trafficking, which I believe is also a very important aspect, because they were able to highlight very, very many details that are important to them, both prior to the repatriation as well as after the repatriation. All the outputs of this focus group that we made with survivors of human trafficking and the case studies that we have analyzed, you will find in these two products that I guess you can see already in the chat. This having been said, and also Vivia said, we have also managed to train very many persons during this project. This is very important, and these tools, I believe, are very helpful. We use them at every transnational referral that we organize, regardless of whether the transnational referral is taking place within the borders of the European Union or outside the European Union. So these tools are important. The trainings are very important. But now on the very practical side, one of the main challenges we face is the lack of resources. And this is not a very difficult topic to address, but it's a very difficult topic to be implemented based on our experience, because even today, for example, we are struggling with a transnational referral of some persons that want to return to their home country that is within Europe, but not within the European Union. And this state is not allocating at all funding for specialized counseling centers for victims of human trafficking. So this means that the persons, after they return, they are already coupled with such a specialized counseling center that exists there, but the counseling center is not able to provide a safe shelter, for example, for them, because they simply do not have the budget. The counseling center is not able to provide them with financial support after their arrival because they simply don't have the budget for it. So you see, these are the very practical challenges we face, even if in theory we have developed very, very good tools in order to address all the challenges. Nevertheless, we have over and over again also successful cases, and I'm sure also in this case we will find a way out. But it's not without the need that every party involved goes beyond its borders. And, you know, when I reach my border and you reach your border, there is usually a gray zone where nobody is responsible for. And it's extremely important also to cover that gray zone because in most of the cases, things get lost precisely in that gray area. Right. One of the cases I wanted to briefly talk to you about, but you will find a lot of case examples in the tools we are providing you, is the case of a person coming from Vietnam. I chose this because I tried to see which third countries are represented in most of the countries that are participating to this event today. This is why I chose this example. So she came from Vietnam. She came, she grew up in a family where there were a lot of financial difficulties, but the person managed to study and has found a possibility of working legally in Europe and to babysit here children. She came to Europe with a visa, arrived at the family. The family eventually has exploited her. After this phase of exploitation in Germany, labor exploitation, the person was also forced into a sham marriage. And I'm happy that starting from last year, these kind of sham marriages we can call forced marriages in the sense of the European directive. It is very important that it has been included in the European directive because this was also a very gray zone. And there were a lot of civil society organizations that fought for it. So I'm happy to see it. And I'm looking forward to the way it's going to be implemented in the legislation. But I'm happy to see it at least in the directive. So this was also the situation of Xuan, who has been forced to get married on the territory of Germany and also exploited then this way. So she has faced two forms of exploitation within quite a short period of time. Because of the very difficult situation in which she was, both mentally and physically, she got to the hospital and a social worker from the hospital identified her as a potential victim of human trafficking and has contacted us for support. This is also very important to highlight through how many different groups one is able to identify potential victims of human trafficking, like, for example, through the social workers from hospitals. The social worker has asked us for support. We were able to talk to Xuan, and just like Vivia at the beginning mentioned about the challenges, it was not very easy to get her trust, because why would she trust us? She has been lied to by various organizations, pretending to be organizations, and even some organizations. She did not have previously very good experience with authorities. So why would she trust us? Therefore, this identification phase was also a process. It didn't just happen. And also the fact that she accepted support was also a process. Xuan wanted to return to Vietnam to her parents, and she wanted to be together with her family as soon as possible. We had very good collaboration also in this case with the International Organization for Migration, and alongside of the International Organization for Migration, we have managed to organize the repatriation of Xuan in Vietnam. The International Organization for Migration has also provided a startup fund, so to say, for Xuan, so that in the moment she arrives in Vietnam, she's able to have housing, a proper housing, and to be able to have some funds with what she can start her life over again in Vietnam. Also, we had a very good collaboration with a specialized counseling center in Vietnam that has ensured a long-term support for Xuan, and also for the family of Xuan, because when we speak of transnational referrals, in my opinion, it is also very important to always think along the indirect victims of human trafficking, in this case being the family of Xuan that has been threatened by the traffickers, because they said if Xuan is going to file a criminal complaint against them, they are going to face the consequences. So in this case, they are indirect victims of human trafficking in our perception. So working alongside of these organizations, we have managed to support Xuan both prior to the repatriation, during and after the repatriation. And Xuan is well integrated now in Vietnam, and things have worked out well for her. But like I said, in our case that we are supporting now, the lack of funding is a very big obstacle. And it's very important to ensure this in order to be able to implement qualitative outputs. Vivian, I think I'm struggling with the time. Yeah.
No worries. I mean, you still
so,
have, maybe you can wrap up, and
yes.
and then we can move on. Thank you.
I could also speak about a similar case from Uganda, but you will find all these case examples in the risk and needs assessment tool. So please feel free to go through it. And I'm also very happy to share my contacts. If after that you have questions, you can always follow up with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adina, for your contribution and for sharing about your work, which is very important in supporting victims of trafficking, not only in Germany, but across borders, and making sure that their needs and rights are at the center of all your work. Now I would like to make a kind of zoom back into the present and what is actually happening at the moment and what will happen in the next months, because as we're all aware, in the mid of June, the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum will be effective, and then each country has to decide how they will apply it. So Francesca Cimino, Dr. Francesca Cimino, will be now give us an overview and also talk more about how this will affect victims of trafficking. And maybe then we can also take some time later on to think about how all of us can work towards ensuring that the rights of the victims are protected. Thank you so much, Francesca.
Thank you, Vivia, and thank you, IRC, for inviting me to this interesting webinar. And also because it gave me the opportunity and possibility to make some reflections on this old new pact, because it was already voted in 2020. Just let me...
Perfect, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I will try to go a bit deeper into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact. Of course, we all know that this new pact is big, complex, and there's a lot to say, a lot to study, even a lot to see how it will be implemented by the states. Because, for example, in the case of Italy, we didn't see yet any roadmap on how it will be implemented. And I will just try to reflect a bit on which consequences will be or might be for victims of trafficking, and also for the work of people supporting victims of trafficking. So first of all, let's just see how the architecture of the pact is. We all know that the new pact was approved in 2024 and will be fully operational in the 12th of June 2026. It consists in 9 regulation and 1 directive. And this is the first big difference from the previous policy on migration, which was the 2015 Agenda on Migration, because, and also the previous, of course, change and institution of the Common European Asylum System. Because here we have 9 regulations and 1 directive. So instead of having, like the previous times, many directives and just 1 regulation, that was the Dublin regulation. So at that time, there was space for the discretionality of the states to implement, to implement the directives and the new procedures. This time, it seems that the Commission wanted to give some, let's say, stability, some common framework, but also common procedures, and to establish common criteria. Let's see for what. So the pact is based on 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars are complementary, of course. The first one is on secure external borders, and this will entail a robust screening, a Eurodac asylum database which will be enhanced, will not be like we knew it so far. There will be a border procedures and fast returns for those who are not provided any protections, and also some crisis protocols and action against instrumentalization of the claims. The second pillar is on fast and efficient procedures. So this is what I was telling you, so to harmonize, but more than harmonizing, in this case, the Commission really wanted to give strict and precise and clear asylum rules, while of course guaranteeing the people's rights, and they gave also EU standards for refugee status qualifications, and we will see how this might affect our work. The third pillar is an effective system on solidarity and responsibility. I will not focus on this for a lot of this today, but it's based on a permanent solidarity framework. There will be an operational and financial support, clearer rules on responsibility for our asylum applications. Of course, we know that the Dublin regulation will be completely updated, and it will be the RAM regulation. And another component of this pillar is to prevent secondary movements. And this will, of course, affect our work, and the work has been done on transnational referral we were talking about. And then the fourth pillar is on embedding migration in international partnerships. So there will be, of course, a work for preventing irregular departures, fight migrant smuggling, and then there will be, I think, a lot of effort on cooperation on readmission. So there will be the development of legal migration, there will be the development of agreements with third countries of origins, but also third countries, let's say third safe countries, because they will be, they might have an impactful role in the asylum applications and processing. So what about vulnerable migrants and victims of trafficking? There are on paper many, let's say, improvements, which are, for example, the first one is that there's a mandatory early identification. I don't know if there's any Italian or Greek in the audience, but for how I see this new pact is kind of, this is the reason why I put it in bracket at the beginning, because there's the operationalizations and proceduralizations of practices that have been implemented already in Greece and Italy in these last years. Because as we know, Italy and Greece often served as, let's say, the frontline states, and also as experimental situation where to try to develop and implement new way to manage migration. So the first important thing on victims of trafficking is this mandatory early identification. So there's the obligation to screen and have a health check, but also a vulnerability assessments. The directive, the anti-trafficking directive, is quoted and is referred to. So there's a strict bond, let's say, with the anti-trafficking directive. There is the suggestion, but not the obligation, to involve specialized anti-trafficking organizations, and this is a pity. Of course, we will see how the member states will choose to deal with this. But as I said, it's not an obligation. So anti-trafficking organization might be there. I think I heard that in Italy it was already communicated that the anti-trafficking direction will be at the borders, where the early identification and the screenings is conducted. But again, this is not an obligation. There's in the directive, in the only directive of the pact, there's the indication of a need for coordination between asylum and anti-trafficking systems. So in order to have more referrals and between the two systems, there's a specific indication on the fact that I would say, finally, I mean, this is a very good news on the fact that the victims of trafficking can be considered as a particular social group. We know that in many member states this was already happening, but this was not, again, a clear and common criteria. And then there's a point also, of course, on the capacity building and training. So the EU AA will take charge of the training in order to provide training to the frontline workers, so that they will be able to spot vulnerability signs. Okay, and this is what, let's say, the pact says. So the first, let's say, the first moment, and also for this pact, is really the only moment probably when a victim of trafficking can be identified. And let's remember, I will stress endlessly the importance of identification of victims of trafficking, early identification of victims of trafficking. And when I say early, I mean, of course, an identification of some indicators, but that may not lead to a formal identification. But we know that the identification is the first step toward the protection of victims of trafficking. So the very first moment when this can happen is, as we were saying, during the mandatory screening. This has to last 7 days, and during these 7 days, there has to be done the identity checks, the health checks, and the vulnerability assessments. And of course, there's a specific mention for victims of trafficking, as they should be given the priority for this vulnerability assessment. However, even though the texts say that the checks should be done by specialized frontline workers, it is unclear who will conduct this early screening. And we know, because we work with victims of trafficking, so a lot of vulnerability indicators are not visible. So this really remember me Greece 2019, more or less, where I was there doing research on the identification of victims of trafficking. And it was a similar situation, because many people told me, okay, but it's very difficult in the hectic situation where we found ourselves to identify trafficking indicators. Okay, sorry. So once these vulnerability checks is made, let's say, it used to, once a person was identified as vulnerable, it used to automatically entitle them to some, let's say, benefits, and avoid some other situation like detention. In this case, this is not automatical. So there might be cases, because the assessment has to be done case by cases. So there might be cases where a vulnerable person can be, for example, detained. And so there's a lack of automaticity of procedural guarantees instead of compared to what it used to be. And another interesting thing is this fiction of non-entry. So this slide is very visual, so it's very interesting, because here we have the external border. I don't have, see. I don't know. So here you have the external border, and then there's this kind of known place where for example, hotspots or transit zones, this area identified as known place. In these known places, the asylum applicants has not formally entered on the EU soil. I'm not a legal scholar. I have no idea how this is possible. I think this is not possible, and probably I mean, there will be a lot to talk about, but this was already implemented in Italy, for example. So in these known places, there's, of course, a restriction of freedom of movement. And we know that legal aid and psychological support might be severely limited. And it's a de facto detention, because of course, it's not defined as detention, but the people there cannot leave these places until they have been identified and checked and vulnerability assessed. So let's move a bit toward secondary movements. So secondary movements, so here we're talking about the RAM and Eurodac. So once a state is identified as competent, this follows the asylum claimants for 10 years. And the Eurodac will not be, as I said, as we used to know it, but it will also collect some biometrics data, like the facial images, but also, for example, previous expulsions, the administrative history. So there's a kind of total tracking of the migrants, of the asylum applicants. If in case of secondary movements, they are stigmatized as abuse. And this administrative history is, let's say, stick to the person for like a digital shadow. What happens when these secondary movements happen? So what might happen, for example, for a victim, if a victim flees traffickers in the first country of entry, from the first country of entry, and maybe they can arrive in a second country. So there's a secondary movement. After the secondary movement, there's the administrative sanction, because as I say, the secondary movement is seen as an abuse, and the person loses the reception condition, might lose the reception condition. So they will find themselves in a situation of institutional lack of protection, which we are well aware how this situation push back the person into exploitation and re-trafficking. There's also another thing, which, I mean, I wouldn't say probably, but nowadays there are cases when a person who got a rejection from another state, maybe this person has a secondary movement and arrives, for example, in Italy, and the claims are reassessed. And even though they were rejected from the previous evaluation, from the previous assessment, they are maybe granted a protection. So this might not be possible anymore, in the sense that as soon as there's a re-evaluation of a claim, the commission will see if it's admissible or not, based on the fact that there are new elements. But if there are not new elements, the claims is just considered as not admissible. And this is something that, no, sorry. This is something that serves the pact. And why I'm saying this? Because the pact is based on the objective to try to render everything swift and fast, and to avoid people to enter the EU soil. So keeping people in these transit areas, transit zones, but these procedures have to be very quick, very fast, because otherwise the territories of these non-entry zones cannot bear too many people there. So the procedures should be, and also the returns should be very quick and very fast. So it's kind of there's a focus on rejecting applications based on safer country and safe country of origin. Sorry, but they are very, very, very similar, these two words. But also on first country of asylum. So as I told you, the case about the member state which rejects a claims, and this is one case for inadmissibility. But there's also this case of the safe third country, and this is quite a novelty. This is quite innovative. So if a person has transited through a safe third country, and this safe third country, I mean, there's not a list of these safe third countries. There are some minimal conditions. So, for example, having signed the Geneva Convention. The safe third country are considered those countries where the effective protection is guaranteed. This effective protection, to my knowledge, does not exist in the international asylum law. So it was an innovative aspect of the pact. So if in this country there's is guaranteed the effective protection, and they have signed the Geneva Convention, and the migrant has transited through this safe third country, the migrant can be sent back to this safe third country where they can process their asylum requests and provide them with the protection. I'm not sure I made myself clear, probably not, but I will. Okay, I see somebody nodding. Okay. So yes, and then the third.
Maybe, sorry,
Yes.
Francesca, maybe you can give a short example, like what could be like a safe third country.
Okay, I mean, it all depends on how the states will consider this safe third country, but based on the information that we have, because also some legal scholars pointed out that this pact is in several pieces it's more like a draft. It seems a draft because it's vague, it's not defined. Some parts are not really clear. But still, based on the information we have about the safe third country, for example, Tunisia could be considered a safe third country because they signed the Geneva Convention, but they don't have an application law. So I was thinking, for example, in Italy, we had a lot of Ivorian girls migrating and stopping in Tunisia to serve as domestic workers and exploited in this context. And then I will come later about the another aspects that is very important to me. But for example, in this case, if the trafficking is not, for example, actual, current, or if the past trafficking and exploitation is not spotted, she might be sent to Tunisia to seek for asylum. And another thing is that in the pact, there's no, I mean, in the pact, in the part for safe third country, there's no mention of the other protections, but only of the asylum protection. But we know that, I mean, we have the Common European Asylum System, we have the subsidiary protection, also the humanitarian protection, even if it's something a bit different, but we have all these. While for the safe third country, only the asylum protection is concerned. Another thing about the first country of asylum, so the member states, the example I was making earlier, there's no need anymore to accept a person who has been flagged as we would say in the past Dublin case, because there's just a take back notification. So this is very delicate because I mean there are I don't know, I see sorry, I see a space, a very narrow space, but a space between these where the people can fall, administratively fall, because a state just sent a notification, the other state doesn't need to accept it. So I can see a kind of lost between these two member states. And then I will jump to the conclusion. And this is, I think, the part that's, I don't know, for me, it's more important, which is the temporal dimension, temporality of this temporal dimension of the pact and temporality of the consequences of the pact on people, on victims of trafficking, and of course, on all the people who work to support victims of trafficking. So the EU institutions want to avoid the entry of migrants, as we were saying, within the EU soil. The fiction of non-entry needs to, the fiction of non-entry, as we were saying, creates de facto detention area And in this detention area, migrants are swiftly screened, addressed to the next steps, which is assessment of asylum claim, return to the country of origin, return to the safe third country, or referral to the anti-trafficking system, because this is also something that the pact introduces. So if a person is screened as a possible victims of trafficking, there's the mandatory indication to send them immediately to the anti-trafficking organization. However, if there's no sign, the indicators are not spotted, the system can work if everything works fast and is done in a few days or a few weeks. Otherwise, the non-entry areas, as we were saying, cannot bear a large number of migrants. And this is the temporal dimension of the pact. But what about temporality? And we know this very well. So victims of trafficking needs time. We all know, I mean, we have case studies of people opening up in 1, 2, 3, 4, and even more months. So I think it would be interesting and important to keep the focus on the principles that guided our work so far, and also that we kind of built together starting from 2000. And I'm referring to, for example, the law result principle enshrined in the Varsavia Convention, or the reflection period. So victims of trafficking need time to understand their situation, how their situation is framed in our difficult policy system, which is absolutely not easy to understand, not for us, not for them, to decide to change it, to change their situation, or not to change their situation, because we also know this happen, or not yet. And what to change if they want to change, what to change about it. They need, and this has been said by both Adina and Vivia, they need time to trust people again, to trust institutions again, to trust organizations again, to decide to open up, and to decide possibly and maybe to denounce the exploiters. So yes, this was my reflection. These were my reflections. I mean, there would be thousands of things to say and to cover about this pact, which is very complex. What I tried to, yes, to put together some reflections, and I'm open to a discussion. I think will be enriching. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. As you said,